Charles V, also known as Charles I of Spain, was Duke of Burgundy and ruler of the Netherlands from 1506. Ruler of the Spanish Empire from 1516 and Holy Roman Emperor from 1519, until he voluntarily stepped down from these and other positions by a series of abdications between 1554 and 1556. Through inheritance, he brought together under his rule extensive territories in Central, Western, and Southern Europe, and the Spanish colonies in the Americas and Asia. As a result, his domains spanned nearly 4 million square kilometers, and were the first to be described as the empire on which the sun never sets. Charles was the heir of three of Europe's leading dynasties, the houses of Habsburg, Valois, Burgundy, and Trastamara. From his own dynasty, the Habsburgs, he inherited Austria and other lands in Central Europe. He was also elected to succeed his Habsburg grandfather, Maximilian I, as Holy Roman Emperor, a title held by the Habsburgs since 1440. He inherited the Burgundian Netherlands and the Franche-Comté as heir of the House of Valois-Burgundy. From the Spanish House of Trastamara, he inherited the crowns of Castile, which was in the process of developing a nascent empire in the Americas and Asia, and Aragon. The latter included a Mediterranean empire that extended to southern Italy. Charles was the first king to rule Castile and Aragon simultaneously in his own right, and, as a result, is sometimes referred to as the first king of Spain. The personal union, under Charles, of the Holy Roman Empire with the Spanish Empire resulted in the closest Europe would come to a universal monarchy in the post-classical era. Fearing that his vast inheritance would lead to the realization of a universal monarchy and that he was trying to create a European hegemony, Charles was the object of hostility from many enemies. His reign was dominated by war, and particularly by three major simultaneous conflicts: the Habsburg-Valois wars with France, the struggle to halt the Ottoman advance, and the Protestant Reformation resulting in conflict with the German princes. The wars with France, mainly fought in Italy, resulted in recovery of territory lost at the beginning of his reign and included the decisive defeat and capture of Francis I of France at the Battle of Pavia in 1525. France recovered and the wars continued for the remainder of Charles's reign. Enormously expensive, they led to the development of the first modern professional army in Europe, the Tertios. The struggle with the Ottoman Empire was fought in Hungary and the Mediterranean. After seizing most of eastern and central Hungary in 1526, the Ottomans' advance was halted at their failed siege of Vienna in 1529. A lengthy war of attrition, conducted on his behalf by his younger brother Ferdinand, continued for the rest of Charles's reign. In the Mediterranean, although there were some successes, Charles was unable to prevent the Ottomans' increasing naval dominance and the piratical activity of the Barbary corsairs. Charles opposed the Reformation, and in Germany he was in conflict with the Protestant princes of the Schmalkaldic League, who were motivated by both religious and political opposition to him. He could not prevent the spread of Protestantism, and although he won a decisive victory against the princes at the Battle of Mühlberg, 1547, he was ultimately forced to concede the Peace of Augsburg of 1555, which divided Germany on confessional lines. Though rebellions were not something that Charles concerned himself with frequently, he was quick to put down three particularly dangerous rebellions in the vital territories of Castile, the Frisian lands, and later in his reign in the port city of Ghent. However, once the rebellions were quelled, the essential Castilian and Burgundian territories remained mostly loyal to Charles throughout his rule. Charles's Spanish dominions were the chief source of his power and wealth. As his reign progressed, his Spanish realms became increasingly important. In the Americas, Charles sanctioned the conquest by Castilian conquistadors of the Aztec and Inca empires. Castilian control was extended across much of South and Central America. The resulting vast expansion of territory and the flows of South American silver to Castile had profound long-term effects on Spain. Charles was only 56 when he abdicated, but after 34 years of energetic rule he was physically exhausted and sought the peace of a monastery where he died at the age of 58. On Charles's abdications, the title of Holy Roman Emperor passed to his younger brother Ferdinand, and the Spanish Empire, including the possessions in the Netherlands and Italy, was inherited by Charles's son Philip II. The two empires would remain allies until the 18th century. Heritage and early life. Charles was born as the eldest son of Philip the Handsome and Joanna the Mad in the Flemish city of Ghent in 1500. The culture and courtly life of the Burgundian Low Countries were an important influence in his early life. He was tutored by William de Croix, and also by Adrian of Utrecht. It is said that Charles spoke several vernacular languages. He was fluent in French and Flemish, later adding an acceptable Castilian Spanish required by the Castilian Cortes Generales as a condition for becoming King of Castile. He also gained a decent command of German, though he never spoke it as well as French. A witticism sometimes attributed to Charles is, "I speak Spanish to God, Italian to women, French to men and German to my horse." A variant of the quote is attributed to him by Swift in his 1726 Gulliver's Travels, but there are many other variants and it is often attributed instead to Frederick the Great. From his Burgundian ancestors he inherited an ambiguous relationship with the kings of France. Charles shared with France his mother tongue and many cultural forms. In his youth he made frequent visits to Paris, then the largest city of Western Europe. In his words, "Paris is not a city, but a universe." He was betrothed to both Louise and Charlotte of Valois, daughters of King Francis I of France, but they both died in childhood. Charles also inherited the tradition of political and dynastic enmity between the royal and the Burgundian ducal lines of the Valois dynasty. Charles was very attached to the Burgundian Low Countries where he had been raised. These lands were very rich and contributed significantly to the wealth of the empire. He also spent much time there, mainly at Brussels. This stands in contrast with the attitude of his son Philip, who only went once to the Low Countries. Until the 1540s, Charles did not spend much time in Germany, though he was frequently quite close to it. He never actually governed his Austrian dominions and made his brother Ferdinand the effective ruler of these lands as well as his representative in the Holy Roman Empire during his absence. In spite of this, the emperor had a close relationship with some German families, like the House of Nassau, many of which were represented at his court in Brussels. Some German princes or noblemen accompanied him in his military campaigns against France or the Ottomans, and the bulk of his army was generally composed of German troops, especially the Imperial Landsknechte. Indeed, in 1519, he was elected because he was considered a German prince while his main opponent was French. Nonetheless, in the long term, the growth of Lutheranism and Charles's staunch Catholicism alienated him from various German princes who finally fought against him in the 1540s and the 1550s. It is important to note, though, that other states of the empire chose to support him in his war, and that he had the constant support of his brother, in spite of their strained personal relationship, whereas Charles spent much of his final years as a ruler trying to address the issue of religion in the empire. It would ultimately be Ferdinand, by then much more popular in Germany, who would bring peace to the German lands. Though Spain was the core of his personal possessions and though he had many Iberian ancestors, in his earlier years Charles felt as if he were viewed as a foreign prince. He became fluent in Spanish late in his life, as it was not his first language. Nonetheless, he spent much of his life in Spain, including his final years in a Spanish monastery, and his heir was born and raised in Spain. Indeed, Charles's motto, plus ultra, became the national motto of Spain. He had many Spanish councillors and, except for the revolt of the Comuneros in the 1520s, Spain remained mostly loyal to him. Spain was also his most important military asset, as it provided a great number of generals, as well as the formidable Spanish tercios, considered the best infantry of its time. Many Spaniards, however, believed that their resources were being used to sustain a policy that was not in the country's interest. They usually believed that Charles should have focused on the Mediterranean and North Africa instead of Northern or Central Europe.